Hi, my name's Jenny Burney, and this presentation is designed to examine the elements of teaching and learning designed for students with advanced academic potential. Gifted learners need differentiated learning, teaching, and the assessment from that prepared for general learners. Within the gifted population, however, there is also variation in the skills and understanding, so differentiation needs to occur within that level as well to accommodate those diverse needs. The environment that nurtures the development of advanced potential is differentiated in at least 5 ways. We know the teacher is crucial to learning, and it is important that the teacher has a license or in-depth training in how to alter the learning experience specifically for the development of those students with advanced learning needs. Research is also clear that achievement gains are the greatest when gifted learners are grouped with other gifted students and provided differentiated curriculum and instruction. The content or the curriculum needs to be both enriched and accelerated. Materials and standards may need to be at a higher grade level, and the content will need to be more complex. The process or instruction will be different to accommodate the more rapid pace of learning and the need to focus on evaluating information critically and creatively instead of just understanding what is presented. Students will use information to construct their own knowledge and to make connections across disciplines. The outcomes or products of their learning will demonstrate advanced understanding. Instead of just checking for understanding, we can see their understanding being used in their writing, their projects, and other authentic assessments. All of the elements of their learning environment will be influenced by their characteristics as well as their personal interests. Let's look at the 3 major areas in greater depth so that we can better understand just how each is differentiated for learners with advanced academic potential. Substantive content. Focus on concepts. The majority of these students will be whole-to-part learners, meaning they want to consider the overarching themes and then consider how particular topics are examples of those themes. You need to have both provision for acceleration and compression of content. These students will have a faster pace of learning and the ability to acquire new information. Most typical grade level instruction can be compressed into less time, meaning more content can be covered in a given school year. Students should be allowed to move on when they demonstrate mastery of required benchmarks. All standards do not need to be covered if the student can demonstrate mastery of some or all prior to instruction. In-depth focus, including enrichment. The extra time that has been bought by not having to cover previously mastered standards can be used to explore more about the content. More advanced reading and vocabulary levels. Grade level texts may not be written at the level needed by gifted learners. Usually those are written at a reading level at or below grade level. Alternate materials will be needed that provide more information, are written at a higher level, and contain rich vocabulary. Use of primary sources, artifacts, and real objects. Because grade level texts are likely to be inadequate for these students, it is a great opportunity to look at the actual documents, the historical accounts, the photographs, the real objects used by professionals, etc. Or full-length selections in original language may be substituted for a short story, or a version or original with simplified language. For example, read the full play in the original language as written by Shakespeare. Interdisciplinary connections. It's meaningful for these students to look at the literature of and about the period of time they are studying in history, to see how the geography influenced culture, how politics influences art and music. The academic disciplines are artificially separated, and these students will see patterns more easily. Includes in-depth and critical analysis. The exploration of why someone acted in a particular way, why decisions were made, how terms evolved, how things are similar, or how ideas might be combined to form new, are all of interest to students with advanced potential and should be a focus of their instruction. Fosters creative expression. Gifted learners are able to problem solve and make connections, which leads naturally to extending a learning task in a new way. They construct their own learning. Good learning experiences for these students will encourage their exploration, their inventions, and their expression of new ways to engage with the content. Really, the focus of the content should be about big ideas. To study ancient Egypt by itself is to miss the opportunity to see it as an example of the broader concept of a civilization in which geography influences all aspects of daily life, in which religious beliefs help explain the unknown, in which communication systems are devised, etc. It is not just about Egypt. A well-chosen novel is not just about the story. It is about greater truths of finding identity, struggle, and issues of social justice. The whole focus of education for the gifted learner should be focused on big ideas and the big picture. Now, while all students need to have enduring understandings, the time spent on such discussions and the focus of the instruction will be greater for students with advanced academic potential. Curriculum is not an occasional use of more advanced content for the gifted students. It's a purposeful plan, ideally mapped out K through 12, so that knowledge and work habits are systematically and systemically developed for identified students with advanced potential. When we consider instruction, or what goes on during class time, these are the critical elements that are associated with the characteristics of gifted learners and with maximizing their performance. Working with intellectual peers. The research strongly supports the value and academic gain of grouping gifted students for instruction in the areas of talent. Not only does this make it easier for a teacher to differentiate for a critical mass of students, but the students gain from the interaction with others who also think at a more advanced level. Students challenge each other. When the content is differentiated and gifted students are grouped together, they can make more than a year's academic growth in a year's time. Initially, gifted learners may experience some loss of self-esteem from not being the smartest in the class, but that does not continue after they experience the increased engagement with learning more targeted to their needs. Habits of mind of experts in the field. These students benefit from looking at historical events as a historian would to provide a balanced and accurate view from multiple perspectives. They need to address scientific questions as a scientist would. They benefit from trying to prove things are true in mathematics or having to explain their problem-solving methods. Opportunities for independent research in areas of interest. One of the characteristics of gifted learners is their intense love of exploring topics in depth. While teaching processes such as research and writing, students should be given the opportunities to select their own topics to explore. Student choice. Choice may be in the way a student wanted to gain information, or in allowing for different learning styles, or choice might be in the manner in which the student demonstrated their higher level of understanding of a topic. Consistently focused in critical and creative thinking. Regardless of the type of learning activity, the focus of time and process will be on the higher levels of thinking. It is not appropriate to give gifted learners just more of the same type of problem to work, MOTS, but that they are challenged to use higher order thinking skills, HOTS. Differentiation for individual readiness and learning styles. Gifted students will not all be at the same instructional level, nor will each individual learner have a similar level of strength in all areas. Furthermore, these learners vary in whether they learn better in visual, auditory, or kinesthetic modes. Variety in instructional techniques and options will be needed as it is for all learners. For example, we can see that even the basic process of asking questions with a group of gifted learners will need to be differentiated. Question asking does the following things, but we will use these purposes to consider the questions at higher levels. Models inquiry process. This will encourage them to ask questions at higher levels. Stimulates different ways of thinking. We can use questions to get students to think both critically and creatively, to make connections to other topics and disciplines, and to use analogies. Questions can clarify key ideas. Our questions can lead them to synthesis thinking. They can inspire curiosity. We can lead them to extensions and independent learning through our questioning. Tips on questioning for gifted learners? Get students in the habit of knowing you will be asking for evidence to support their point, that you are not looking for a single answer, that you will want to probe answers for greater depth of connections, and that you will encourage their responses to others' answers. Use the words associated with Bloom and Bloom's higher levels to help formulate your questions. About half of your gifted students will be introverts, meaning they will not be quick to respond, but will want to mentally rehearse a response before speaking aloud. Since you are looking for complexity and thoughtful responses, even introverts will have the time to think about the question, formulate a response, and participate in a meaningful discussion. Let's talk just a bit about strategies for differentiation. When people talk about differentiation, much of the time is spent describing the ways various learning activities can be structured so that different students can have choices or can work on different things individually or in small groups. These are organizational tools. Just because students are not engaged in whole group or teacher-directed instruction does not mean the content, process, or products have been appropriately differentiated for gifted learners. Different does not automatically translate to more appropriate for gifted learners. What they are asked to learn, to understand, and to do needs to be qualitatively different to address their higher level cognitive functioning. This difference will be infused of all of their time in the content area. These strategies are all good tools, but how they are used will make the learning truly differentiated for the gifted. When considering assessment for gifted students, we are talking about more than tests and quizzes. This includes all of student products we use to assess their attainment of the learning goals. Effective communication in oral, written, and visual formats. The ultimate goal is that students can communicate their advanced understanding effectively in multiple formats. We want them to write well for different purposes. We want them to be able to speak before a group and to be articulate. We want them to utilize technology and offer visual formats to communicate their ideas. Demonstration of advanced understanding. This includes effective use of a variety of technology and media. We want gifted students to be comfortable with using technology to communicate effectively. Real audiences. It is more meaningful when gifted students can perform for others, can prepare a presentation for a community group, can participate in an academic competition with guidelines drawn up by others. These are outstanding students, and their work rises to a new level when they consider an audience beyond their teacher. Plan K-12 for coordination of advanced products so that students have a broad range of capabilities at the end. They should know how to write a paper with source citations. They need to be able to summarize and synthesize information from a variety of sources. They need to make speeches. They need to recite poems. They need to construct science fair exhibits. They need to make PowerPoint presentations. They need to develop brochures and informative posters, etc. Through mapping across the grade levels, one can see the gaps and the overlaps in student preparation. We've mentioned higher order thinking skills frequently. All students need to learn to think critically and creatively. This is not the sole purview of gifted learners. The difference comes in the proportion of time that is spent at the various levels of thinking. Because the gifted learner grasps content more quickly, less time is needed at the knowledge and comprehension levels. They generally understand what they read and retain information and new vocabulary with fewer repetitions. The time gained can be spent instead on comparing, on drawing out the most important information, on looking at things from different perspectives, and on considering where the content will go. Thinking of the Bloom's taxonomy in terms of a triangle on the left for average students and an inverted triangle on the right for gifted learners shows the instructional time spent on the various levels. We will go through some examples of critical elements of differentiation for the gifted using first John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath. Now this novel is commonly taught in high schools. To refresh your memories, this is the story of the Joad family who is forced to move when they lose their tenant farm in Oklahoma during the Great Depression. They have almost nothing and set out for California, where they have heard there are crops to harvest for migrant workers. They join many others on similar journeys. This novel could be taught in grade 8 for gifted learners, making a more advanced novel about the plight of the common man taught at a younger age. Like many novels or films, through time, you do have to be sensitive to issues that are raised within the novel that may be objectionable to some parents and or in some communities. Read such novels and view films carefully in advance and communicate with your families. In this case, it is a great American novel that can be done in an interdisciplinary way through an integration of social studies and literature. It provides for many enrichment opportunities through the black and white photographs of the era and the music about the period. You could examine accounts of the time, interviews, newsreel footage, newspapers, etc. The novel can be examined for the view of women and their place, the view from the landowner and from the migrant worker, from the point of view of local governments. Classroom debate and projects could be structured around the views of Marx and Lenin as compared with the longing for a piece of the American dream. A sociological perspective might look at the development of communities within the encampments of the migrants on their way to California and within the formalized camps within California. Extensions are available for student choice in interest. For example, how did the 1940 film starring Henry Fonda use techniques to effectively convey the story? How would a feminist view the Jode women? Trace the use of biblical imagery through the novel. A great discussion could evolve about the masterful writing of Steinbeck to shine a light on the need for social justice. And why is this a classic novel? Other interdisciplinary connections beyond those previously mentioned are possible as well. When we think of differentiating our discussion questions, keep in mind these could be used for class discussions, debates, writing prompts, projects, independent studies, or used in any of the differentiation strategies shown in a previous slide. What date or evidence from the novel would suggest that kindness may be more common among the poor than the rich? What inferences do you draw from the following statement by Ma? Up ahead, there's 1,000 lives we might live, but when it comes, it'll only be one. What are the consequences for individuals and society of the Great Depression? Using Bloom to generate questions, we might say, who are the main characters? It is here a class of average learners might spend more time. It would be important to be sure the student understood reading the dialect, who the characters were, understanding the setting, etc. But remember that this is more frequently taught in high school. In a class for the gifted, less time would be spent at this level and more time would be spent on higher levels. What causes the journey to California in the first place? Compare the move of the migrant workers out of Oklahoma to the forced moves of Native American tribes. Analyze the role of Rose of Sharon. What causes her to behave as she does? Synthesize the feelings that Casey has about being a preacher. Evaluate the decision to move to California. Was it the right one? Create a new ending for Grapes of Wrath and construct the justification for it being a viable alternative. Another way to look at the novel is through a problem-based learning approach. Think of what one approach might be. You've been told to investigate the working and living conditions of migrant workers in California in the 1930s, with recommendations for safeguards to be in place to ensure that the children of these workers have an education and the families have sanitary living conditions and access to medical care. Now, you would have to help students figure out what they need to think about in order to complete that task. Given the facts of the novel, what do you know about the living conditions of migrant workers, including the education of their children? What else do you need to know? What sources would be useful? Are there parallel situations in such an existence? As you can hopefully see from the examples we've gone through, differentiation for the gifted learner must permeate all parts of the learning experience. It is not something tacked on at the end. It is different in goals, in content and materials and resources, in activities and projects, in the strategies used, in the outcomes, and in assessment. Differentiation for students with advanced potential is more than just enrichment. It is qualitatively different in all aspects. It is not different occasionally or when the teacher has time to develop a different assignment. It is also not just about doing the 6th grade math book when in 5th grade. It is not just allowing an occasional independent study. It is not limited to a different spelling list. It cannot be done in a 20-minute extra period once a day when other students who need help are sent for small group instruction. It is a different way of teaching them different content with different expectations for the outcomes. Now we will look at what an assignment might look like for a regular class, and then how it might be differentiated for a class for gifted learners. After a few examples, you can try to do one or more of these yourselves. For example, for a grade level group, we might have the task describe the American Revolutionary War and the American Civil War. Include information about causes, main leaders, and outcomes. For gifted learners, who may not be at the same grade level, we might say, identify 3 similarities and 3 differences between the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Explore topics in depth, such as weaponry, political positions of parties involved, strategies, outcomes. You may select another topic with teacher approval. What features of the second example make it appropriate for gifted learners? Some answers might include that there's a higher level task of comparing and contrasting, greater focus on concepts with political positions and strategies. We've given a choice in what to look for, and we gave the option of coming up with their own topic. For a grade level group, construct a bar graph of the populations of these countries. For a group of gifted students, find the population of China for the past 10 years. Enter this data into an Excel spreadsheet. Construct a graph using the Excel tools. If there is uneven growth, investigate possible causes. Is the trend line linear or exponential? Can you predict the population 10 years out? Now, when thinking about what features of the second example make it appropriate for gifted learners, we might say, well, having to do research to find the information, not just being given it. Having to use technology. Analyzing data. Investigating causes. And using an authentic task. The skills that are called for in that second example are higher level as well. Here's another example. For a grade level group, we might say, using resources found in our library, find information on a famous inventor posted from the list on the board. Answer the questions. What led to the discovery? Describe early attempts. How well was this accepted? What was the outgrowth of this invention? However, for a group of gifted students, we might select one of the following topics to research and construct a persuasive essay defending your position. Use multiple sources, including primary sources, to construct your position. The rate of new discoveries has slowed in recent years. Most new ideas are developed by large companies. The most important new idea was the internet. Now, when we think about what features of the second example make it more appropriate for gifted learners, we might note such things as they are asked to research a topic, they are asked to use primary sources. The assignment is concept-focused. For a grade level group, describe the setting of the story. For a group of gifted students, we might ask them instead to describe the setting and why that is crucial to the author's purpose. We might offer specific examples from the story to illustrate the points. So what features of the second example make it appropriate for gifted learners? This might be having to determine the author's purpose. But the author's purpose may be implied, and so that's a higher level task. Providing specific evidence can demonstrate inference. It requires relating the setting to the purpose. This is an opportunity at this point in the presentation for you to think yourself or to think with a colleague and take one of the following topics and give an example of a learning activity or assessment that would be appropriate for grade level learners, and what that same learning activity would look like for gifted learners. Any of these topics will do. The Bridge to Terabithia, or say the end of World War II, using percents, or scientific method. Differentiating the various learning activities is only part of the process. Those, along with the differentiated content and assessments, will form the classroom days and support the larger units. Differentiation in planning needs to occur at all of the levels shown here. When it does, the power of differentiation begins to emerge. Let's look at how an individual teacher of grade level content might plan for differentiation. This is a visual representation of a curriculum map or scope and sequence of sort. When a teacher begins to look at the whole year, the patterns and relationships and the big ideas can emerge. You might prefer to do your first map by month, but you can get the idea from this map that shows a year divided into quarters. When you make a map for a particular area of the curriculum, you can see if you are really covering the types of research you want for the whole year, and whether you have a variety of products that you are teaching them to use to effectively communicate their understanding. By looking at the whole year in this way, you can check to be sure that you are including more advanced content and skills beyond grade level. The last entry on the map is self-regulation. That term includes the systematic development of the ability to work independently. You want them to learn to manage their time, to be able to plan for long-range assignments, to organize their work, to develop good study skills. When gifted kids do not have enough academic challenge, they do not have to develop those crucial skills in order to get good grades. A good curriculum for the gifted will build those skills in using the advanced and challenging content and learning activities. After teachers construct maps for their own subjects and/or grade levels, it's good to put those with other teachers' maps and grade levels. Summarize the information into main concepts and skills taught in that grade level. Then look at the major projects and research skills that are utilized. Consider the affective components emphasized in particular years. For example, work on bullying, or doing career exploration, or learning to use an assignment notebook. When each year for the gifted students is mapped, and the maps are put side by side, the gaps and the overlaps become more obvious. Example, they did dioramas 3 years in a row. I didn't know you used that novel. We teach that novel too. So the mapping process can be helpful. Curriculum maps can be done initially on large chart paper with individual teachers using sticky notes to put their own content on. The process itself sparks very helpful conversations. Many times districts will use curriculum mapping for the regular curriculum, but this is intended for mapping the curriculum and learning experiences for the students identified as having advanced potential. The goal is really to move from having a good single activity for gifted learners occasionally to a more planned set of experiences. It is more than when it is convenient for the teacher, but it is planned among all those responsible for the education of students with advanced potential. It's more than a single activity or assignment or project or unit or year. It's a plan, K-12. It's a plan of lots of activities, many lessons, the careful selection of the materials, the assessments and the units and the years. During the era of the Impressionist painters, a technique called pointillism became prominent among some artists in the late 19th century, in France primarily. In this technique, the artists used tiny dots of color or paint that together resulted in an overall effect. Obviously, the artist had to have a master plan in mind to achieve the desired effect. This is analogous to the sum of many purposeful acts of differentiation, carefully planned and orchestrated to achieve an overall goal of an appropriate education for gifted learners. The power of the plan is only as good as the careful placement of each dot or learning activity. Curricular experiences for gifted learners can result in impressive achievements if these are planned for maximum effect. Each teacher has an important part to play as he or she has their own part of the canvas. But district planning can orchestrate the entire canvas. Our goal should be to harness as much of the differentiation as possible to maximize the learning for these students. Thank you.